Hi, everybody. I
Hey,
thought I
you
didn't
know
press
what?
go live.
It's symbolic of America right now. We're just stitched together with glue, doing our best to hang on, Francesca.
I am so sorry. This has been my job since the 100 days started. I've been great up until now, but welcome to America Unhinged. We're a little unhinged today. The stonks are unhinged. I am Francesca Fiorentini.
And I'm Wajahat, and this is a show that tracks the first 100 days of Trump's second administration, and it's no longer a constitutional crisis, it's constitutional crises, and on top of Liberation Day, where things are going so great that even me, as an English major, can understand that this graph, no bueno, Francesca. We
Mm.
in America are the black line, and that black line is at where is that? Oh yeah, all the way at the bottom as the stock market collapses in anticipation of a global trade war, which might trigger a global recession and, God forbid, a depression. But other than that, I'm feeling peppy. How about you?
I'm feeling peppy. We have to bring things up by playing pretty much the funniest thing I think Trump has ever said. He is nothing if not an entertaining fascist. I mean, really. On the show, we are going to be talking again about this Liberation Day, the trade war that is now ongoing, except it's been sicked on the entire world. And we're going to be joined by financial journalist James Surowiecki to discuss that. What does it mean? What's the goal? What's the angle here? A lot of different theories, but they are not as they appear. And we are also going to talk again a little bit of more cleanup from Elon's massive loss, because we cannot forget his loss in Wisconsin's Supreme Court race on Tuesday, and whether or not he will really get the hell out of Dodge with Doggy.
Now you got to play the clip.
I do have to play the clip before we do all the things, guys.
This clip was so good during rehearsal that I heard Francesca laugh out loud, and then she goes again, and then we played it twice.
But likewise, an old-fashioned term that we use, groceries. I used it in the campaign. It's such an old-fashioned term, but a beautiful term, groceries. It sort of says a bag with different things in it. Groceries went through the roof, and I campaigned on that. I talked about the word groceries for a lot.
Bag with a lot of is it an old-fashioned word, or do you just have you just never stepped inside a grocery store in your entire life? Has someone else done the shopping for you, you silver spoon man baby? To this point, lo these 78 years or however old you are, that like you think it's an old-fashioned. No, things in a bag. I was saying this during rehearsal. We do a rehearsal. It's incredible. We have understudies and everything. Where it's like he says the word groceries like he says Puerto Rico, like he's just discovered the word Puerto Rico, groceries, It's just like, this is the man. He's even telling us, I campaigned on it. Literally no idea what it was. Things in a bag.
When we do the rehearsal, I'm played by Ali Velci and Francesca is played by Alex Wagner. But in the rehearsal, we were talking about, back in the day, I got gray hairs. In the 80s, I too went to the grocery stores right after I went to the haberdashery. Normal people know what groceries are, but like you said, Donald Trump doesn't. And like I said during the rehearsal, he probably refers to the fridge as a box with ice where I get Diet Pepsi from. Folks, it's going to be like this for the entire hour, but we have an expert on who's going to break it down. First, please like the show. Please subscribe. This is independent media. We do not bend the knee to Democrats or Republicans or billionaires. Please subscribe. This is the first type of a show on Zeteo, a live show twice a week, hour-long, produced by Mel, our mighty producer. Guys, give a golf clap to Mel. She is dog sick right now. And she goes, don't worry, I'm here. So she produced this show. Please help her out. Give her some love. The super chatters, Grumpy Dragon. Every show drops $20. We see you, Grumpy Dragon.
Thank you.
Thank you to the super chatters and those who can go to this donation page. Thank you, Grumpy Dragon. And please ring that bell, and you'll know when we go live, like we are right now.
Ahora mismo. But first, because we all know you guys wanted to know, we have I'm like, graphic. What's going on in Loomer land? What? Yeah, what's going on with right-wing influencer Laura Loomer? You thought she was just Timu Melania. You thought she was just having a little bit of a fling with Donald Trump on the campaign trail, and maybe she was iced out of the inner circle, and you would be wrong, because it turns out Laura Loomer, a right-wing 9/11 conspiracy theorist, open racist, said the Oval Office would smell like curry should Kamala Harris be elected. She has, I guess, personal firing power within the NSC, the National Security Council. Trump fired 6 NSC officials after an extraordinary meeting in the Oval Office with far-right activist Laura Loomer, who laid out a list of people she believed were disloyal to the president. They were described by one U.S. official who had direct knowledge of the matter. The decision came after Ms. Loomer vilified the staff members by name during the meeting on Wednesday, where she walked into the White House with a sheaf of paper attacking the character and loyalty of numerous NSC officials. However, none of the people she attacked, Waj, was Michael Waltz. She did that. The guy who added the journalist to
and also, Francesca, as we've discussed on the show, we found out in the past week, because Signalgate has, God bless Signalgate, the door has not closed. There's just gems being dropped. Still uses Gmail for government emails, and uses Venmo publicly like Mike Gates. He didn't learn the lesson. And we know Pete Hegseth shared military plans and lied about it. But none of those people got fired.
No, the people fired were Brian Walsh, Senior Director of Intelligence, Maggie Doherty, Senior Director of International Organizations, Thomas Boudry, the Senior Director for Legislative Affairs. None could be reached for comment. In other words, any of the people who probably wouldn't have added a journalist to a Signal chat to talk about war plans on Yemen were fired. Say what you will about them, and obviously Laura Loomer's critiques are that they're neocons. They were considered to be too hawkish, too eager to commit American troops around the world, and fundamentally at odds with Mr. Trump's America First foreign policy. The agitators have used the phrase neocon, short for neoconservative, to describe many of those staff members working for Mr. Walz, again, who is still in office, tried to defend these people, but he's the director.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to stop the firing of his people from a right-wing influencer who once chained herself to Twitter headquarters. Like, what are we doing here? Like,
this, if the murder-suicide of the U.S. economy by Trump wasn't the leading news, this would be the leading news. That was a tweet by Zach Beecham of Vox, and I reshared it. I'm like, on point. Because, folks, let's just spend a little bit of time with this. It's important. Laura Loomer, as Francesca said, is not just your garden variety MAGA nut. She is so nutty that Marjorie Taylor Greene, yes, her of Jewish space lasers fame, looks at her and says, she is a racist lunatic. When you've lost Marjorie Taylor Greene, you become Laura Loomer. I've been following her career for a while, unfortunately, not because I'm a masochist, even though I am, because, spoiler alert, I am Muslim, a brown-skinned man, and Laura Loomer has emerged as one of the most notorious hateful anti-Muslim bigots, a woman who calls herself a proud Islamophobe, a woman who took joy in the deaths of those refugees who drowned in the Mediterranean, a woman who, as Francesca mentioned, chained herself to Twitter headquarters because when Elon Musk didn't run it, her conspiracy theories were so batshit and so unhinged, they took out her account, and she led that protest. A 9/11 truther, Francesca, and tell him how reekish this administration is with that little. Tell him who was in that meeting today.
It looks like not only was it, so it was only 30 minutes. She's got a sheaf of paper, which is wild. 30 minutes. That's all it took for Laura effing Loomer to get 4 people fired. JD Vance was there, vice president. Obviously, Michael Waltz was there. He was a little late, apparently. Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Sergio Gore, head of personnel, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, whose own brother died in 9/11 in the attacks. And this woman is a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. Like, it's just like, what, none of these people could stop it. And that's how you know, Waj, in my opinion, I mean, the president, it's coming from the president. This is coming from like the top dog to be like, whatever she says goes. And I don't know. I mean, there's an interesting little rift in MAGA of like the people who are actually America first and actually like isolationists. Those happen to be like the Loomers, the Bannons, who are also rabid racists, but they don't like the idea of wars abroad. I just want to posit to them Israel. They never have anything to say about Israel. In fact, they're hook, line, and sinker with the rest of the neocons about Israel. Israel, who is the country that is not only dragging us into / we are supporting their ongoing war or genocide on the people of Gaza, the broader war on the people of Palestine, but are wanting to drag us into a war with Iran, salivating at the chops. My prediction has been since Donald Trump was reelected, we will be attacking Iran within a year. And so I just, it's all very funny as you're like, yeah, are you getting rid of the neocons? Except you're not actually going at the real issue here, which is Israel's dragging us into broader wars. And you seem to be super happy to do that. That's just not that anyone wanted to have that discussion, but that's sort of where I come down on this.
But two things based on what you said, there's factions within factions, right? Because in the America First faction, they're saying, stop wasting money abroad. Spend that money here. Stop doing these wars like Canada and Greenland and like, you know, Yemen strikes. No, we don't want that neocon hawkish stuff of post 9/11. And then within that, like you said, Israel exception, but you're seeing a split with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. And so whoever has Trump's ear last, right? For those of you who have followed Trump's psychology and what Trump does, why he does it, whoever gets in his ear last, he oftentimes literally repeats what they have said to him in front of the microphone, which is why it's always topsy-turvy. So Tucker openly is saying, why are we going to go to war with Iran for Israel? Candace is saying it, right? Then you have these little splits, which, by the way, I encourage this divide and conquer. But you take a step back, folks, Signalgate is a huge controversy, all right? Hexet lied to us. Michael Waltz is incompetent. This is not the first time they have used an unsecure app to discuss confidential information. All of them were aware because the Pentagon itself sent a memo saying Signal is unsecure, could be hacked. One of the people who was the envoy to the Middle East was in Russia during this conversation. An individual literally sucked into the phone of Michael Waltz. I'm using his old language. Jeffrey Goldberg. And like Jeffrey Goldberg then goes, okay, I probably shouldn't be here. Bye. They still kept doing it.
Yeah.
Begs itself how many other conversations they've had. Who has been exposed? Have other journalists been invited? Have foreign countries hacked it? Pete Hegseth, why did you lie about sharing military strikes? So someone should have been fired the past 2 weeks. Donald Trump, knowing his psychology, follows the Roy Cohn method. Never admit you're wrong. Deflect, 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 attack, attack, attack. Even Republicans were like, Dave Portnoy, Tommy Lahren were saying someone's got to go. Michael Waltz was that guy who was supposed to go. Donald Trump refuses to apologize. Caroline Leavitt just 2 days ago said Signalgate is over. And then it was Laura Loomer, not, J.D. Vance, not, some of the professional people on his staff. He ignored all of them. It was Laura Loomer, this far-right nut, who somehow got a 30-minute private interview with the world's most powerful man with some sheets of paper. And when she told him to fire these three people, he goes, okay, I think Loomer's on it.
And it was 6 people. Sorry, thank you for
six. Thank you. 6. It was updated to 6. Thank you.
6 people. Got 6 people fired. None of them were responsible for Signalgate. I mean, it's just, and again, it is the same thing as letting Elon into the Oval, right?
That's right.
These are creatures of a vile internet of like the worst of the worst. And these people have not even been confirmed. They are not officials. And obviously the ones who are confirmed, clearly Michael Waltz, or who are cabinet members, are not doing much better. But like, this is so irresponsible. Like, I don't even, like, does the right not, you and I go on Piers Morgan and talk to these ghouls all the time. I'm like, do you see yourselves? Like, do you know, you looking at what they're doing here and who they're allowing in? And the question is, like, would they be okay if they were the right-wing influencer? If Tommy Lahren was the right-wing influencer who gets on the inside, who knows?
Well, but, you mentioned that, and just to put a pin on it and talk about how petty, insecure, vindictive, and unprofessional these people are, that Marjorie Taylor Greene, Laura Loomer beef was precisely because of that territoriality, because Loomer, if you remember, was awfully chummy with Donald on the campaign trail for a while. And Marjorie didn't like that at all. Folks, like I said, if we didn't have the murder-suicide of the U.S. economy, to talk about. That would have been the biggest news. But Francesca, take joy in knowing that you have been liberated. Yes, folks, I'm here to announce that all of you are liberated because yesterday Donald Trump at the Rose Garden mentioned that he was unveiling expansive new tariffs on Liberation Day, a major escalation of his trade war that he started, referring to the historic move as a, quote, declaration of economic independence. It's a risky bet. That's CNN being very subtle there, to address what he thinks are unfair trade practices that could send prices higher for American consumers and weaken economic growth, according to most economists. Using national emergency powers, Trump announced 10% tariffs on all imports into the United States, and even higher tariffs, Francesca, on goods from about 60 countries or trading blocs that have a high trade deficit with the U.S. Some of these countries include China, India, the EU, China and India that makes most of the stuff because corporations don't want to pay Americans fair wages. So they outsource the labor to these people in these countries who get paid nothing in deregulated industries. But I digress. They will be levied new duties of 34% and 20% respectively. And folks, before I play this clip from Donald, I want to remind you, this is important. This will be a massive tax hike of how much? $6 trillion over how much period of time? 1 year. So, yep, you're going to be paying for tax cuts for Elon by paying so much more for eggs and for cars and for construction. Good luck buying a house.
This
Good
is
luck
different.
having a 401k.
But, I mean,
this
is what's amazing about this is like this murder suicide of the economy comes on top of the murder suicide of the federal government. That's right. Mass layoffs that are obviously impacting the private sector as well. The destabilization of Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare and all of these benefits. This is on top of the way that's being made, that is being cleared for those tax breaks to the ultra wealthy. They're not using the tariff money for the tax breaks. They're using our money. They're using our researchers, our, preventative institutions like the FDA that make sure we don't die of E. coli, right? Like that is what they're doing in order to fund, and they're cutting Medicaid, of course, and so many other things, Meals on Wheels, in order to fund the tax breaks. The tariffs are just an added little FU from this idiot who somehow, and again, we're going to talk about what are the theories on why they're doing it, thinks that this is a good idea. It's
a poisoned cherry on top, and we will break down how it actually benefits the oligarchy, not, the average Americans who are struggling to get by and who are working 2 jobs just to stay broke. This is Donald on the tariffs.
European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see. It's so pathetic. 39%, we're going to charge them 20%, so we're charging them essentially half. Vietnam, great negotiators, great people. They like me, I like them. The problem is they charge us 90%. We're going to charge them 46% tariff.
I'm not done yet. It gets dumber, folks. It gets dumber. Here are the White House tariffs. It's just so beautifully laid out for America. Bang! And since I'm a teetotaler, when we were rehearsing, when I was Ali Velshi and Francesca was Alex Wagner, Francesca, I didn't know this because I don't drink. Tell the people what this looks like.
I mean, yes, people on Twitter have pointed this out, but this looks exactly like a list of beers if you go to a microbrewery and the percentages are just how much percent of alcohol they're in. That it's just so, like the colors. Everybody knows this. This is just the guy at the microbrewery with a weird mustache is trying to sell you on some new IPA, and you're like, nah, I don't know if I want to go there. Like the dankest, haziest, which I love a dank hazy, by the way.
The formula was cracked, and we're going to talk about later how they came up with the formula. But as Francesca mentioned, I think this was done by a DOGE member. I think the formula was done by a DOGE member. Again, an 18 to 25-year-old who's helping gut the administrative state. Some of these tariffs include 46% tariff on Vietnam, FU Vietnam, 32% on Taiwan, which is apparently now a country, 49% on Cambodia because we dislike you more than the Vietnamese, 37% on Bangladesh. If you like those sandals and shoes and shirts, yeah, that's Bangladesh. And you know what? I didn't like the third Madagascar movie. Damn it. They needed more lion. So F you.
7%.
F you, Madagascar. 47%.
What could we possibly be like the trade deficit with Madagascar? How come no one's talking about it? Like,
it gets worse. Can I give you one more? Can I give you one more?
I love how much it gets worse.
The biggest FU, though, the two islands that have really made America worse, have taken our jobs, have slept with white women and produced brown-skinned babies. It's the islands Heard and McDonald, which have a population of 0 people. And because we live in the dumbest universe, in the dumbest timeline, they now have a 10% tariff. You know the two animals that exist on those islands, Francesca? One of them's right there, penguins. And the other one, seagulls. I, for one, say F you, seagulls. You took my Subway sandwich that I threw away. I think you've been freeloading for too long. And penguins, you had your moment. March of Penguins. It's time for a new animal to rise.
I mean, folks, really, the penguins are just like a cute tax. You know what I mean? That's just on you. You got to pay to be that cute around here. You know, you got Laura Loomer out here. Like you're making her look. I mean, she looks the way she looks. It's pretty terrifying. Yeah, man, there's nobody living on these islands. If you all want to have a little bit of a laugh, I had some fun with this one on my Instagram and my YouTube. But you can't make it up, Watch. It is so stupid that people, you know what I heard? Here's another one we're not covering. One of the islands, the only thing that's there is a US military base. So there would be taxes on the US military base, which honestly, don't say that too loud because Trump's probably like, yeah, that's actually a really good idea. And Hegseth like, that's the DOD, whatever. Like, this is how unthought through this is. And I just want to point out, Republicans are rightfully freaking out about this.
Yes.
Ted Cruz is walking away from this. There are some attempts to possibly...
Rand Paul? You see Rand Paul yesterday?
Rand Paul said, quote, and this is very important, William McKinley, who is the president that Donald Trump fawns after, who, placed a bunch of tariffs on this country. He also served, I believe, was it him? Served non-consecutive terms. But
no, not McKinley.
Oh, it wasn't McKinley. Okay, I thought there was more in common. Never mind. I'm dumb. But he said, quote, when McKinley most famously put tariffs in 1890, they lost 50% of their seats in the next election. He said, driving home his point. So he's warning that they're going to get absolutely destroyed in 2026. And because the McKinley follow-up is very important. It's like, okay, McKinley, Trump loves McKinley, loves the tariffs. It was a political total bloodbath afterwards. Lost 50% of their seats over these tariffs.
And tell them what happened to McKinley.
Oh, see, this is the rest of my knowledge.
He got shot. There was an assassination attempt on McKinley. It didn't work out well for him. So when you have,
I'm really more of a Clinton on.
Francesca's like, listen, I don't know what groceries are. I don't know what haberdasheries are. I'm a 90s girl.
Assassination. What a word. What a word.
Folks, sometimes things are so bad that you had me nodding vigorously with Rand Paul when he appeared next to Tim Kaine against these tariffs yesterday on CNN. I was like, that Rand Paul, he's absolutely correct. And then I'm like, oh my God, I just agreed with Rand Paul. Sometimes a turd is so stinky, no matter how much you polish it, you can't make it smell like potpourri. I give you folks this clip of Donald Trump's own Treasury Secretary who really struggled. Oh, how he struggled.
China has this 34% tariff. There were already 20% tariffs in place on China. So is that 34% on top of that, meaning it's a 54% reciprocal tariff on China?
I believe it is.
The whole interview was and then this is JD Vance, the biggest reek, trying his best on Fox to sell this turd. And folks, you gotta love it. For the first time in 28 years, Fox, last time I checked around 1 p.m., didn't have the stock ticker at the bottom. If you've watched news, folks, usually at the bottom, especially of Fox, they got the scroll of the stock ticker. Around 1 p.m., Francesca, it was magically removed. I wonder why. Here's JD Vance, though, yesterday on Fox, selling this Liberation Day.
What can you tell the American people that they just can't afford an extra $3 here and there?
about the government making up the difference from that? Will costs go up at some point? Will this just be temporary? Are we talking 3 months or 6 months?
Well, we certainly hear, and I appreciate, how I grew up.
I know.
I grew up in a family that often did live paycheck to paycheck, and we know a lot of Americans are worried. So we are fighting very hard to bring prices down. You don't fix that stuff overnight. We know people are struggling. We're fighting as quickly as we can to fix what was left to us, but it's not going to happen immediately. But we really do believe that if we pursue the right deregulation, we pursue those energy cost-reducing policies, yes, people are going to see it in their pocketbook. They're also going to benefit from the fact that foreign countries can't take advantage of us anymore. That means their jobs are going to be more secure.
Bullshit. Excuse me. Alhamdulillah. I just want to remind folks, Francesca, that we talked about it. The first interview that Trump did was with Fox, Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity tried 5 times to get him to talk about the economy. And what did Donald Trump say in response?
I don't care. That's not important. Groceries. What an old-timey word. Ooh, I talked about, what are these edges? Edge. Is the first G silent? The second G is hard. Edges. It's amazing to me. And before we bring our guest on, I think it has been said that if you really wanted to do tariffs or, work on the trade deficit with China, there are ways to do it. And I would argue, although I do not like everything in his legacy, of course, especially on foreign policy, Joe Biden, through the Inflation Reduction Act, through trying to stimulate the economy. I mean, it's so funny that these capitalists, talk about incentive constantly, but then when it comes to actually building up national industry, you have to understand they need incentives to do that. You can't just build a manufacturing plant with the, snap of a finger, click of a pen. This has to be a concerted effort. When you've got, 40 years of global neoliberal economics, and you're trying to put the cat back in the bag in one fell swoop, people will become destitute. So, if the angle really is we're trying to support American industry, American workers, number one, you would be pro-union, and they are not. But number two, you would understand that if you rip the Band-Aid off, people are going to lose their life savings. However, there are ways to bring manufacturing back, but you have to move conscientiously, incentivize the right industries. Don't be such an idiot about it if that indeed is your intention.
Yeah, but that is not their intention. And a Gallup poll came out that said 81% of Americans actually favor foreign trade. They just want reforms, right? What Donald Trump says is, this is what Donald Trump did. I think this analogy I gave. He goes, you want to repair your house? Okay. He blows up the house blows up, catches fire. The house next door catches fire. The entire neighborhood burns down. And then Donald Trump comes back and says, I think I'm the best home repairman on earth. Give me a tip.
Yeah.
That's how they're behaving right now, folks. But listen, the damage is extreme. We're going to have our guest on right now, but let's go through some graphics. Mel did this, even though she was so sick. This is the number. Look at that. That's how the Dow market is closing. Stocks, Francesca, plummeted Thursday with the S&P 500 seeing its biggest one-day loss since 2020. Francesca, I wonder what happened in 2020.
There was a thing, and I'm not putting my finger on it. I can't remember. Oh God, what was it?
Something happened.
Anyway,
the broad market index dropped 4.84%, posting its worst day since June 2020. Again, don't know what happened in 2020. Dow tumbled nearly 4%, marking its worst session since June. Wait for it, Francesca. 2020. What happened in 2020? And the Nasdaq plummeted nearly 6% in the biggest decline since March 2020. Amazing. And this is how Trump reacted to all of this.
The markets today are way down, the worst day in years because of the tariffs. So how's it going?
I think it's going very well. It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on, and it's a big thing. I said this would exactly be the way it is. We have $6 or $7 trillion coming into our country, and we've never seen anything like it. The markets are going to boom. The stock is going to boom. The country is going to boom.
It's gonna boom. Oh yeah, it's gonna boom. All right.
Can I tell everyone that me and Mel had to educate you about the boom? You all know that Francesca had no idea. So me and Mel were like, boom, boom, that annoying child and dad. And Francesca like, what are you talking about? Then we explain it to her. And she goes, really? This is viral? She goes, yes. And he goes, I'm so glad I missed it.
Ducked under that. I mean, yeah, I picked the wrong year to start saving. You know what I'm saying? I picked the wrong year to be like, maybe I should open a Roth IRA. Maybe me as a podcaster, and a comedian with no saving. Like, I can't even look now. It is terrible. And I just want to remind everybody, 2020, guys, 2020, the pandemic, the worst stock market performances since the global pandemic. Like they're doing it on purpose. So again, what is the goal? What is the aim? Is it all self-serving? Are they shorting the American people, which is one of the theories? And joining us to discuss it, he's a financial journalist who's written for so many publications that I'm going to read through now. Well, he'll tell us about. My bad, James. Please welcome James Surowiecki.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you for being here.
Sorry.
What the hell? What the hell, I think is the short of it. No, what's the angle here? I guess is we don't have to start off with this, but it feels like there's a big why. And there's a lot of swirling theories as to why Trump is doing this. But on its face, he says it will help everybody. I guess maybe let's take that argument that this will actually be good in the long run.
Yeah, I think it boils down to something pretty simple. I think Donald Trump really hates trade deficits and he really loves tariffs. And that sounds really simplistic and it sounds kind of banal, but I actually don't think it's that much more complicated than that. I think that Trump has always, Trump, in my opinion, doesn't really care very much about policy, really generally, right? I think most things he doesn't really care about. He cares about being on television. He cares about being the center of attention and the like. But trade, weirdly, is one of the few things, maybe the only thing, that he has consistently cared about and been invested in psychologically, really for almost the past 40 years. So you can go back to the 1980s. And back then he was concerned about Japan, but he's saying the exact same things. Like, we're being ripped off, we're being beaten up, we're being knocked around, they're knocking the hell out of us, blah, blah, blah. And so I think for Trump, whenever he sees a trade deficit, and I mean with any country, that we have a trade deficit with a country, he basically says to himself, we're getting ripped off. They are ripping us off. Somehow they're ripping us off. And so what he wants to do is find a way to basically stop that because he hates getting ripped off in his own mind. And so I think, because, one of the things you mentioned China in a few minutes ago, one of the things, and if you read like MAGA attempts to rationalize what's happening, people will talk about China. They'll say, we have to do something about China. We have to do something about, our trade deficit with China and the like. And I certainly think I'm much more supportive of free trade than a lot of people on the left. But I will say that I can see the argument for saying we should do something about China. But the tariffs that he is imposing are not just on China. They're not even primarily targeted at China. He literally put tariffs in place on almost every country in the world. And I think the reason is that he doesn't want us to have a trade deficit literally with any country in the world. Now, his plan is not going to accomplish that, but that I think is where he's coming from.
James, you're an economic journalist. You used to write for New Yorker. I've been following your tweets because I'm a simple English major. I took Econ 101 at UC Berkeley, and I'm really proud, folks. I got an A. But I'm a simple man, and so I look at your tweets, and I saw those numbers yesterday on the bar menu that Francesca described again, and I was trying to figure out how they came up with some of these numbers, right? And in the back of my mind, I said, I didn't share this out loud because I didn't have any proof. I'm like, some idiot probably came up with some dumb formula. And I'll leave it to the smarter people to figure out. And lo and behold, James, thank you so much for doing your service. This is your tweet. Just figured out where these fake tariff rates come from. They didn't actually calculate tariff rates plus non-tariff barriers as they said they did. Instead, for every country, they just took our trade deficit with that country and divided it by the country's exports to us. So We have a $17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. Its exports to us are $28 billion. 17.9 divided by 28 equals 64%, which Trump claims is the tariff rate Indonesia charges us. What extraordinary nonsense this is. Can you break it down to me like I'm an 8-year-old?
Yeah. So when Trump presented this chart, you remember at the thing, he of course had the chart as a prop because he loves, spectacles. So what he said and what was written on the chart was that that number in that left column was the tariff rate. And as he said that includes like literal tariffs. So whatever, you have to pay 10% on cars, plus what they're calling non-tariff trade barriers. So that would be something like maybe a country's trying to manipulate its currency, or maybe it has regulations, or in the old days, you would actually have quotas, right? Like you could only sell X number of cars. A foreign country could only sell X number of cars. We don't really have those anymore, but that's an example of a non-tariff trade barrier. So they said that's what it is. And he said, this is the tariff rate that countries are charging us. That's what he said. But then when I saw the chart, and I think a lot of us who are interested in this stuff looked at the chart, we said, wait, as you said, these numbers don't make any sense. Like there's no way Vietnam has a 90% tariff rate on the United States. And alternatively, there were countries on there that do have relatively high tariffs, like Brazil, that only had like a 10% tariff rate. So it was like, what is going on here? And what they did was, as I said, they came up with this formula. And the formula was just take our trade deficit with a country and divide it by our imports from that country or their exports to us. And that rate was what they called the tariff rate. It's not the tariff rate. It's a fictional number. And I should say there are a few countries in the world where we have our trade deficit is small, or alternatively where we actually have a surplus. We actually have a surplus with Brazil, weirdly, and Australia. But those countries, they just gave them a flat. They said they're charging us a tariff rate of 10%. So even if we have a surplus with the country, we're still imposing a tariff on them. So there are a couple of things about this that are interesting and useful to think about. One is the basic premise of it is that if we have a trade deficit with a country, it's the only reason for it is that there are trade barriers that are preventing us from closing that deficit. Now that's not true. Like a country a lot of people have talked about in the last couple of days, which never barely been mentioned ever, is Lesotho, this tiny.
Yes, I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you about Lesotho.
Okay, so Lesotho. So if you look at that chart, Lesotho supposedly has a tariff rate of 99%. That's what's on the chart, right? So as a result, we're going to impose a tariff rate of, I think, 50% on them, right? Is that what it is? That may not be on, I don't know if it's on those two, maybe. But anyway, but Lesotho has tariffs, but they don't have 99% tariffs. The reason that rate says 99% is because Lesotho exports diamonds, and it's a very poor country, maybe not very poor country, that just doesn't buy a lot of stuff from the United States.
Right.
So that trade deficit is not the product of trade barriers or us getting ripped off. It's the product of, we like to buy diamonds, and American companies aren't like, let's go into the Lesothan market. But for Trump, it's all, if it's a trade deficit, it's a trade barrier. There's something wrong. We have to do something.
They're screwing us.
Can I just ask?
Well, I mean, it's always that. It's always that we're being screwed. That's his attitude.
Because, and what's so funny and ironic about the whole thing is that like globalized capitalism has helped impoverished and or keep countries impoverished.
Yeah.
And now we are blaming them for not being a consumer-based enough economy to buy our goods. And it's like, buddy, because the monopoly man divided the world based on who's the worker and who's the consumer. You think Lesothians are buying the diamonds that they're mining? No, it's white chicks in LA. You know what I'm saying? Like, mine is not a diamond, by the way, but it just like, it's just so funny to try to put the cat back in the bag here. And it is very punitive, it seems, on the poorest countries.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other aspect of this is obviously countries that are trying to move up the development ladder. One of the obvious ways you do it is you do it by exporting, right? You do it by bringing in industry. Oftentimes industry, it's oftentimes the product of outsourcing, but you move up the ladder that way. That's certainly what happened in Taiwan, South Korea, Japan a long, long time ago, right? But what Trump is saying to countries like Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh, countries that are, varying degrees of on the development, varying places on the development ladder, but that are trying to move up the ladder. He's basically saying to them, unless you start buying a lot of stuff from us, or alternatively sell a lot less to us, which would mean essentially staying impoverished, then we're going to put these massive tariffs on you and make it harder for you to prosper. So it's a really hard catch-22 for them. And can I say one other thing?
Please. You can say whatever you want, man.
One of the important things about this phony way they came up with the tariff rates is that it actually makes it very hard for a country like Vietnam or Cambodia to figure out what to do. Because if they actually had a tariff rate of 90%, and they wanted to cut a deal, they could just say, all right, you know what, we'll cut the tariff rate to 45%. But they don't have a tariff rate of 90%. That's just a product of the trade deficit we have with them, which is the product of all these big factors, like they're poorer than we are and they don't buy as much stuff and all these other things. That's a lot harder to fix if you're Vietnam. I mean, what do you do? How do you make sure that your citizens are going to buy American goods? Or do you really want to shut down factories? No. So Trump has created this situation where it's very difficult for people even to cut a deal if they wanted to.
James, Francesca mentioned punitive and how this is going to hurt those poor countries who really have treated us well and that we benefit from. But can you talk to us about how punitive this will be to the American people? I still don't think people realize how this is going to negatively impact our lives, perhaps our generation. And before you talk about that, I just want to bring up some facts. Thank you, Mel. Don't worry, we're not going to go through all this, but this is thanks to Yale Budget Lab. The April 2nd action, Liberation Day, is equivalent of a rise in the effective U.S. tariff rate of 11.5 percentage points. The average effective U.S. rate after incorporating all 2025 tariffs is now 22.5%, the highest since 1909. I didn't say 1999, folks. I'm not Prince. I said 1909. The price level from all 2025 tariffs rises by 2.3% in the short run, the equivalent of an average per household consumer loss of $3,800 in 2024. In the last day, folks, the price level rises by 1.3% in the short run. The April 2nd tariffs alone and all the 2025 tariffs together disproportionately affect clothing and textiles, with apparel prices rising 17% under all tariffs. Again, can you break this down for our community that is freaking out, that doesn't understand the stock market, that perhaps doesn't like the numbers? Like they're asking yourselves, okay, am I going to be better or worse?
I mean, my argument would be that the vast majority of us will be worse off. And there are a couple reasons for that. I mean, one is, let's say that part of this long-term goal is to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States, right? Like, I understand the impulse. I was born in an old industrial town in Connecticut, and where my grandfathers worked in factories that eventually shut down, moved either to the South or eventually I think moved abroad. So I get that. But the problem is, there are two problems. One is that manufacturing nowadays tends to be pretty highly automated. So even bringing manufacturing back to the United States is not going to create a huge number of jobs. And then the other problem is the vast majority of working class people in America and middle class people in America do not work in manufacturing, right? They do other things. And so what these tariffs effectively they're effectively a tax on the working and middle class people to try to subsidize some manufacturing jobs, and then also to satisfy Trump's desire to get rid of all trade deficits. Because, I mean, it's not that complicated. Tariffs are a tax. Some of that tax will be eaten by the foreign producer. That's true. Some of it will be eaten by the importer, but a big chunk of it will be paid by American consumers. And the other big problem with tariffs as a tax is that they're regressive taxes, right? So they're not progressive taxes like an income tax is. They're taxes that they're flat, so everyone pays the same rate. But then working and middle class people pay much more of their income on goods than wealthier people do. It's just the reality of the way we spend. And so as a result, tariffs just hit working and middle class people harder.
Yep.
And as you just read, the magnitude of these tariffs is so far beyond anything we've ever seen. If you're on Twitter, you'll sometimes get a pushback the last couple of days. They're like, well, what happened in, the first time Trump was president, those tariffs were like very small. The China tariffs were semi-meaningful, but, for the most part, he imposed some pretty small tariffs. There was nothing like this. And so I think, that is a big issue for American consumers. And I think you're going to feel it pretty much everywhere. And one other thing I'll say, he's imposing tariffs on things that we don't even have any possibility of ever making in the United States. Like my favorite example is, because I drink a lot of coffee, is coffee, right? So the only place in America we grow coffee is Hawaii, and we grow a tiny amount of it because you need a huge amount of water to grow coffee. And we're never going to have a coffee industry in the United States. Or bananas, right? So we import a lot of bananas, and again, we grow very few bananas in the United States. But Trump's just slapping tariffs on all of these things. Why? What is the benefit of making coffee more expensive? Like, we're not going to bring coffee makers to the U.S. So anyway, yeah.
I just felt terror. I'm sorry. I know I should probably be more afraid for like my IRA, but I felt like terror.
Same.
Yeah.
I like coffee and bananas.
Yeah.
There's one tear.
I just felt true terror. Yeah, I mean, I do want to go to the impact, just sort of globally, and how countries are responding to us. But I did want to ask you, because of, you answered it, look, this is something Trump's been obsessed with.
Yeah.
But everyone around him, I mean, especially some billionaires, seem okay with this, almost as if they are not going to be affected. And so the question is, like, are we going to see? Here's my question. Is he trying to make this country like a Thailand or like a Vietnam kind of join the race to the bottom, right? And so we will devalue the dollar. That will get people to come here. They're going to be working for nothing. The dollar's not going to be worth anything. But at least manufacturing will come back in, again, this grand race to the bottom. Or is it some sort of, a stock market shorting scheme? Is that what's going on here?
I definitely don't think it's the latter. I don't think, certainly on Trump's part, I don't buy that there's any like sinister plan in that way. I think that, first of all, I'm not totally convinced Trump ever thinks that far ahead. Sure. And I do think for Trump, it really is fairly simple. I do think it boils down to this trade deficit thing. I think that there are people around him who are trying to construct a kind of coherent rationale for doing this that would involve actually devaluing the dollar, making it easier for American manufacturers to compete globally, right, et cetera. They wouldn't describe it as a race to the bottom. They would describe it as a kind of reordering of the global order. But my personal opinion is that I think most of that is an attempt by them to come up with some coherent rationale for what for Trump is basically just like trade deficits are terrible. We have to impose tariffs to solve that. And in terms of the billionaires being concerned, I do think the most interesting thing, and I think in some ways, I wouldn't say shocking, but I think the most interesting thing about what happened on Wednesday was that, two things. One is the market totally misread it, right? So investors just did not see it coming. They, if you looked at the market in the days leading up, market was flat, actually rose a little bit, I think, over the previous 5 days. I think people kind of thought in the end he'd kind of come to his senses. So they just totally misread it. And then I think the second thing that's very interesting is he had to know that the market was going to sell off massively. He had to know it, and he didn't care. And that is really interesting. And that is, like, I can see why you're coming up with or suggesting that there might be a conspiracy theory here, because it is interesting that he basically was just like, I don't care. Now, Trump is, it's a weird situation for him. He's not going to run again. Well, okay, not going.
He's not going to leave again.
He's not going to run whatever. So, maybe he doesn't care, but it's very interesting that he basically was like, I just don't care.
James, we're keeping you a bit longer. I want to ask you this question because it is important. It doesn't just affect the poor countries. It doesn't just affect Americans. Like you said, it's reordering the post-World War II era and affecting our allies. And Trump, some people have said, he's acting like a mafia boss, and he wants to punish those countries that, don't bend the knee and reward the countries, right? And he assumes that all of our allies will come like Oliver Twist and say, okay, thank you, sorry. But Canada and other countries have a different take on this. Listen to this.
Canada must be looking elsewhere to expand our trade, to build our economy, and to protect our sovereignty. Canada is ready to take a leadership role in building a coalition of like-minded countries who share our values. We believe in international cooperation. We believe in the free and open exchange of goods, services, and ideas. And if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will.
That's very sobering to me. It's saddening to me. And in real time, I'm seeing America not become first, but become last and literally punch itself in the face. James, your response.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting things that happened, when was it, last week, and in some ways even more disturbing, was that Japan, South Korea, and China met to talk about potentially working more closely together. Yep. And, the EU today, you saw the EU talk, the head of the European Commission was talking in pretty sobering terms about, recognizing that they're not going to bend the knee, and they're going to kind of figure out a way to work with other people. And I think, again, the mafia boss analogy is, I think, a correct one. I think, Trump has always, in some ways, kind of explicitly fancied himself that. He sort of has always kind of liked mob guys. He sort of, and I think his attitude is very much that, or, kind of like a Latin American caudillo, basically, that you essentially, if you pay tribute to him and bend the knee when he wants you to, then okay. If not, you'll be punished on some level. And I think that is what he's trying to do. And I don't think Trump has any interest in or cares about at all the international cooperation or whatever. I think he's certainly as happy to talk to, Xi or Putin as he is to talk to Macron or now Mark Carney or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's actually quite, I'm an American. I tend to be an optimist about America. But this is, I will say, the first time in a long time when I've thought, wow, he could really wreck a ton of things. So.
Caroline Leavitt was also asked about, how this will impact NATO, and she just sort of automatoned it and was like, it's gonna be amazing. I mean, there was absolutely no registry that this is impacting our allies in Europe, in Asia. I think the answer is just China. China is basically wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. James Surowiecki, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you and follow your work?
I'm a contributing writer for The Atlantic. So I write for The Atlantic. I write for Fast Company. And then you can find me on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. So, because you can always find me there too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Take care. God, you know what? I don't feel better understanding more. Is that, you know what I mean?
Damn,
I was
you, James.
Damn you, James.
Why did you have to be so clear and connect the dots for us?
James explaining the bad math that was done is just oh God. And it reminds me of being in math class and or an algebra, be this is definitely the solution here. I gotta figure it out. Why is it giving me 0.000 numbers? I don't know. It's good math. What?
How come that's not one of the 4 options?
Exactly. How come that's not one of the? That's truly my life.
And Francesca just writes E, circles it, and says 0.001, and then she could be in the Trump administration.
This is me in a standardized test, just freaking out. Why is my algorithm not working? Oh my God.
We have good. Francesca, I have some good news for you. We're going to end on 2 pieces of good news. Usually, Francesca gives me some good news at the end of every show. I want to repay the favor. And folks, it's okay to be petty sometimes. And I want to be a bit petty today and relish in the pain of another person. I usually do not relish in the pain of another human being. But today, for the world's richest man, who is also an insecure bully and a racist, who clearly did, according to me, allegedly, I'm saving Zeteo, 2 Nazi Zig Heils. Folks, It's been a bad week. In fact, you could say it's probably one of the worst weeks he's had. Musk had a terrible, no good, bad day. He spent, folks, $20 million, actually over $20 million on a losing candidate. Yep, the pro-Trump, pro-Musk candidate for the Wisconsin Supreme Court lost. Judge Crawford won. Thank you, everyone who came out to vote in Wisconsin. Hours after the loss, Francesca, Tesla reported its biggest sales drop ever, falling 13% in the first quarter. And because I'm petty, Tesla's number one rival grew revenue by 60% in the same time period. Thank you, Karma. Then there came a political report quoting MAGA insiders who say that the bromance between Musk and Trump might be souring. I think that was maybe, 12 Scaramucci's?
Yeah.
All it took was losing $100 billion in 3 months to make Musk change his tune on government work. And the last day, with all the humiliation, people are now saying that Trump has told his inner circle that Musk will be stepping back in the coming weeks from his current role as governing partner, ubiquitous cheerleader, and Washington hatchet man. But the president remains pleased with Musk and Doge's initiative. But both men, Francesca, have decided in recent days it'll be time to take a little break.
It'll
and
be
for Musk
a
to return to his business.
It'll be a conscious uncoupling.
A conscious ooh, nice deep cut. Gwyneth Paltrow, Chris Martin. I remember that. Trump allies say that Musk, folks, shockingly, is unpredictable, unmanageable, who has had issues communicating his plans with cabinet secretaries and through the White House chain of command because it's going so well with Signalgate. And he frequently sends them into a frenzy with unexpected and off-message comments on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. And just an example, here's Musk on X, Twitter. Any government institution is most likely to be the opposite of its name.
I actually kind of agree with him when it comes to the Department of Defense. Oh, the one place that he won't cut because he's got so many contracts running through it. It's good that this is happening, Waj. My feeling on this distance between them is that he's going to be around. He's going to be clinging on no matter what. He's still going to be using his money. If it's not this race, he'll continue to wield it. It's just that he's the villain. So it's going to take a number of strikes, a number of losses. He lost this battle, but he's trying to win this war. When it comes to Doggy, I mean, what's there left to cut? Like, that's my question. It's like, what's there left? Right now, they're redoing the Social Security Administration, hacking it to pieces, changing the algorithm. They're destroying it. I'm like, meanwhile, RFK Jr. is out here doing his own handiwork on HHS, firing people at 40% of the workforce. Oh, just kidding. Some of them are rehired. Well, I don't know. Let me eat some roadkill.
I'm making it up. That was some breaking news today that he said, oh, oops, yeah, we accidentally fired some wrong people. Don't worry, we'll get them back. Because it worked so well when Musk accidentally fired hundreds of people who look after a nuclear stockpile of weapons. It took them a while to hire them back. And we still don't know, Francesca, if all of them have been rehired.
I swear to God, it's a good thing we're the hegemon for right now. Because, you know what I mean? It's like other countries where they let their nuclear stockpile not be guarded. Bad things happen. We have we could do a week, can't do 2-3 weeks. Anyway, there's we can move on to our final.
Mel wants to go home. She says, give me the good news, Francesca.
Mel's like, let me go night.
Mel's like, I can barely see. Y'all are killing me.
There were two resolutions of disapproval over the sale of massive bombs and other offensive military equipment to Israel that came before the Senate. And 15 Democrats voted with Bernie Sanders to block aid to Israel. Obviously, it was voted down by the majority, but it's good to know that, there were 15, Sanders, Dick Durbin, Andy Kim, Chris Van Hollen, Mazie Hirono, Ed Markey, Tina Smith, Brian Schultz, Elizabeth Warren, Martin Heinrich, Jeff Merkley, Chris Murphy, Ben Ray Lujan, Peter Welch, Tim Kaine. They all voted on all three of the resolutions in previous Congress. Hang on, I'm just sort of reading. I'm sorry about this. It doesn't seem like Warnock and Ossoff joined. They joined on some of the joint resolutions last year. But yeah, so it was 82-15 and 83-15 to reject 2 of these resolutions. So again, the numbers are growing, as Janelle Fields says. It's weird that like Ossoff and Warnock weren't on board with this one. But look, we're getting closer. It's getting more politically popular to say, hey, maybe we should obey American law and not sell weapons to a country that is committing war crimes by the ICC's judgment of it.
And I tweeted that earlier today also. You know, some people might say, oh, it's only 15. Folks, Francesca and I have gray hair. To get 15 Democratic senators, especially the ones that you listed, to sign off, that's a positive sign. And I predicted that number is going to grow by next year. In fact, maybe even 6 months. It is becoming unpopular to support genocide. It's becoming unpopular to support apartheid. It's becoming unpopular to support occupation. And some of those names, folks, they have presidential ambitions. They're not dumb. So the fact that they're coming out and signing that, that's a really good sign. That's all the time we have for today's show. We want to save Mel. Mel, get better. Thanks so much for doing this. All those graphics and videos you saw, that rundown was thanks to Mel.
All the ones I ignored.
We saw her in rehearsal.
All the ones I blew through.
Mel's like, hey, guys. I'm like, Mel, I was going to say you look good, but I'm like, no, you look terrible. Please go sleep. But she still produced the show. Thank you to our guest. Folks, again, this is independent media. Please, if you have not subscribed to Zeteo Substack, subscribe. If you have not subscribed to Zeteo's YouTube, which you're watching right now, please do. It really helps us. That's how the algorithm works. Please like this video. As soon as it's posted, which is going to be in about a minute, please share it anywhere and everywhere. Please, thank you. I want to say to all the super chatters, all the people who give us $1, $5, $20, especially in this economy, it goes such a long way. Please go to Zeteo's donation page. And Francesca, she does the good work. She needs your support. Francesca, shamelessly promote yourself, please. How can people find you, support you, listen to you?
Bituation Room, wherever you get your podcasts, or on youtube.com/FrannyFio, FRANIFIO. Also doing live stand-up in Pasadena, April 23rd, and in San Francisco on May 7th with my husband, Matt Lieb. Check me out.
And I am at thelefthhook.substack.com, The Left Hook. And tomorrow I will be co-hosting Democracy-ish with Danielle Moody, 12 p.m. Eastern Time live. We will be back next Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
And until Tuesday, keep your screws tight, America. We're going to need them. Bye-bye.